Hello and welcome to the Orange County Taxpayers Association OCTax Talk. I'm Carolyn Cavechi, President and CEO of OCTax, and we are so pleased to have with us today Darrell Johnson, CEO of the Orange County Transportation Authority, OCTA. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
It's a pleasure. A lot of times I get things addressed to OCTA for Orange County Taxpayers Association.
They do have a few of the same
Close,
letters.
and I have to say, no, add the X to the end. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. Have you always been interested in transportation?
You know, I have. I started college, I wanted to go to law school.
Okay.
And I took a state and local government class, and I fell in love with this idea that fixing local communities and small cities and big cities was way more important than I thought as going into that. And one of the things that I really fell in love with this idea of infrastructure. And that's water, that's transportation, that's education facilities, but I thought that the transportation side was the most exciting. So at that point, I just shifted my thoughts entirely, and I wound up with a degree in political science and one in business, and I've been in transportation now 25 years.
Really? What was your first job out of college in transportation then?
My first job out of college is I joined Amtrak, which is the National Rail Passenger
Yes.
Corporation, as a management trainee. So I went to work in Washington, D.C. with 6 other people from around the country, and it was 12 months of traveling every place in the nation, every facility, every type of department you could imagine.
Wow. A lot of train stations then?
A lot of train stations, a lot of train stations and a lot of sort of back office facilities, really seeing how railroad operations, construction, planning was done. And it was nice. I'd spend one day with the president of the company. The next day I would be, in a yard wearing jeans and figuring out how trains work.
Great program.
So it was very exciting, very good.
Good for you. Well, we have you here in Orange County. You've been with OCTA though for a while, even before you were the CEO. You kind of worked your way up in the system, right?
I came to Orange County in the summer of '03, so almost 13 years, and held a variety of positions, planning, mostly capital construction, and then I was the deputy CEO for 3 years, and I've been the CEO for just about 3 years now.
Wonderful. Well, good. Okay, so Orange County is a little special. It's a self-help county. So could you kind of explain what that, for the taxpayers, what is a self-help county, and why is that good for us here in Orange County?
Well, it's a great question. I think the main part to think about is, prior to this idea of a self-help county, most of our infrastructure, transportation funds came from either the state or the federal government. And this idea of helping yourselves, hence the name self-help, really is you choose to impose a tax. In our case, it's a half-cent sales tax in Orange County, and it's entirely dedicated to transportation within our county. Those dollars don't go to Sacramento, they don't go to Washington, they don't go north to Los Angeles or east to Riverside, they stay right here in Orange County.
Okay, so we tax ourselves, but we get to keep the money here
and we get to keep the money here, and we get to make the decisions. Locally, we get to make the decisions.
That's good. Well, especially nowadays, I'm not quite sure I want people in DC making decisions about me. Well, good. So we do have a half-cent sales tax, but the first Measure M was started in 1991, and it went through 2011. So let's talk a little bit about that first. What were some of the big projects for that? Anything that stands out that was built during those years?
Well, it's probably hard to sort of, maybe for some of our viewers, to think about what Orange County looked prior to 1991, but think about the I-5.
Right.
That was probably our single biggest thing we did with Measure M1, is the I-5 was completely rebuilt through the entire center part of the county, through Anaheim, through Santa Ana, all the way down to the El Toro Y.
Right. So, that's right.
So virtually every freeway was improved. The 57, the 91, the 5, the 22. We didn't work on the 405. We're working on that coming up soon. But we added 190 lane miles to the freeway system in Orange County under Measure M1.
That's a lot of throughput for cars.
Absolutely. Yeah. Think about how the economics would be different in Orange County if we hadn't done that. And we helped ourselves do that.
Yeah. Well, I always, we talk about, when people ask me about, the difference between Orange County and Los Angeles County, I always just say, what do you think when you're coming home and you hit Buena Park and the freeway opens? And I always say you hear angels singing and the freeway widens and all of a sudden you can move.
Yes.
So much different. All right, but the second Measure M then came. When was it put on the ballot again?
It was put on the ballot for November of '06.
Okay.
And it was sort of unique. It was put on the ballot in '06, but it wouldn't go into effect until the spring of 2011.
Right.
And that was really, I think, strategically well thought out by OCTA Board of Directors, because it gave the ability to plan for those 5 years from when it was passed by the voters, so you would actually start collecting the sales tax. So we were able to do some really cool things. We called it an early action plan. So we started doing all that planning work, that environmental analysis work, all those things that take so long before you get out and actually do construction. So when that sales tax dollars actually came in, we were ready to spend right away and get the projects out to the people, because that's the most important thing, right? Is getting it to the people so they can see it.
Well, and it passed the first time through in 2006.
Yes.
Shocker in Orange County, we have this reputation, at least, of being anti-tax, but yet the voters overwhelmingly. It was way over what it needed, a couple percentage points at least.
Well, you may know, maybe your viewers know, that it's 2/3 to pass a special
right.
sales tax. So you need 66 and 2/3
Yeah.
percent, and we were right at 70%.
Okay.
So it's really tough to get 2/3. When we passed the first sales tax measure in Orange County in 1991, you only needed 50%.
Right.
The law changed, and I think it's better.
Yeah.
And it puts the onus on the public agency to really say, what are you going to do to get 2/3 of the taxpayers to vote to put more taxes on themselves?
Well, one of the reasons I think M2 passed the first time up, a couple reasons, but I think one of the main ones is that the taxpayers were given a booklet almost that said, this is what we're going to do for your taxpayers, which of course meets the OCTax motto of fair, understandable, and cost effective. So let's talk about M2 now, which is in effect from 2011 to
2041.
Okay,
it's
so
30
it's
years.
a 30-year time, this one. So what is M2? What are we getting for our half-cent sales tax?
So
Let's
you
talk about the
described
program.
this idea of a booklet, and from a OCTA staff perspective, we look at that booklet every day.
Okay.
And in that booklet really is a layout of what we're going to do. So 43% of the revenues go to the freeway program, and we listed 13 very specific freeway projects that we're going to do. Then we take the next 32%, and that goes all back into the streets and roads.
Okay.
So a portion of that is given back to every local city here in the county, pothole repair, repaving, all those types of things.
Okay.
And then another part of it is competitive. So we look for projects that have sort of the most bang for the buck, right?
Okay.
Traffic congestion relief, signal synchronization, things of that nature. And then the final 25% goes into transit. And it's important, I think, for your viewers to know it's not to pay for the transit that's already out there, the buses that you see every day.
Okay.
It's new things.
Okay.
It's expanded bus service. It's expanded commuter rail service into Los Angeles and Riverside.
And Metrolink.
Metrolink,
Okay.
things like that. And then we do have a very wonderful set aside. It's 5% of the program for environmental mitigation. So we're
Okay.
able to set aside open space to sort of offset the impacts of these projects.
Okay, so for the money that goes back to the cities, and a part of it is automatic, the cities can spend it on anything they want to as long as it's transportation related, or are there some guidelines on that?
There's some guidelines, and the state constitution has something known as Article 19, and it is a very good framework for what gas tax dollars should be spent
Okay.
on. So the OCTA board, when they put it forward in 2006, modeled that constitutional Article 19.
Okay.
So there are all those eligible type costs. So
Okay.
that really guides that. So you can't take transportation dollars and go build a library.
Right.
Even if you think that's more important, you can't do
Right.
it. So,
Okay.
and we hold the cities to that standard. They get audited, they get reviewed.
Okay. Are there any, are there any guidelines in for them to get that money, or is it just automatic? It comes back to the cities?
It's automatic, but they have to become eligible.
Okay.
And that eligibility is really important. So they have to do a number of things, including annual reports of what they did with the money.
Okay.
They have to make sure that they submit to us a pavement management plan, so we
Okay.
know how are they
Right.
keeping that pavement in good quality.
Okay.
They have to give us a 7-year capital plan, so we know what they're going to do with the money over a 7-year period.
Okay.
They have to obviously keep accurate records. They're subject to audit at any time. So it's a list of things, and if they do it right, then it's an automatic formula for
Okay.
them to get the money.
Good. And then they compete for projects
Right.
then. So what kind of projects would they be competing for as the cities? And
Most of the projects that the cities compete for would be sort of your bigger projects, an intersection widening where you're going to put in 2 left
Gotcha.
turn lanes, or you're going to sort of widen the intersection, or you're going to take a 2-lane arterial to a 4-lane arterial.
Okay.
Something like an Irvine Boulevard improvement or a Ball Road,
Okay.
Catella. Sort of think of those really
Right,
big sort
the
of
big
arterial
ones.
streets. There are a lot of cars, lots
Right.
of improvements needed.
Okay.
And we really try to match the dollars going to where the traffic congestion relief
Okay.
is needed most.
Were those projects that they competed for, were those projects laid out in Measure M, or are those projects that the OCT Board of Directors, which I'll get to in a second, that they and staff have kind of put out as well? Were there specific projects in Measure M that we said cities were going to compete with?
For the streets and roads portion of Measure M, it's not specific in the
Okay.
measure, but what is specific is that it has to be competitive, and the Board of Directors has to adopt criteria of how we're going to select
Okay.
and score. Really the focus on making sure that everybody in the county, all the cities, have a fair chance.
Right.
And it, again, to that idea of where's the best bang for the investment dollar.
Orange County is one of those places where it isn't like a rural area of the country. I drive to maybe 5 cities daily, just moving around, because you don't almost know where some cities end and some start. So, for me, Anaheim or Santa Ana or Garden Grove or Tustin, I'm just as interested in how those cities are taking care of their transportation systems as I am, the city of Orange.
Absolutely, particularly the central and north part of the county is very urban, and as you point out, the city limits sort of butt up against each other, and to traffic, it doesn't stop at the city limits,
that's
right?
Water just keeps going.
Right, and we work hard to make sure those cities are working together with each other through a process that, City of Orange couldn't widen the street if Irvine wasn't on board as well, right next to each other, with Tustin and with Santa Ana, those types of things.
Interesting. So the transit, you hear a lot about transit. It's a highly subsidized part of our transportation system, but in a way, I mean, if you had to buy a bus ticket to get on a bus, nobody could afford to ever ride on a bus. So talk about the system here in Orange County. How are we doing with our transit system? Ridership is, kind of stable, going down, going up?
Well, I think first of all, the bus system in Orange County is the 20th largest bus system in the United States.
Okay.
So we carry about 50 million people a year. That's down from our peak right before the Great Recession. We carried about 60 million people a year. But we're still carrying almost 1 million people a week, and it's an important part of Orange County. Ridership's down a little bit, and a lot of that is when we talk to former riders, a lot of them have moved out of Orange County because the cost of living is very high, or jobs have left.
I think that's probably a huge reason, is job loss.
There's a lot of that. So one of the things we're underway with now is something we call OC Bus 360, the idea of looking at the whole bus from all angles. And we're looking at fare media, mobile ticketing, and also the route structure. My thinking is, we don't want to be the bus system of yesterday, we want to be the bus system of tomorrow. And how can we look at what the needs are going to be from this point forward, not trying to get back to the past.
Yeah, well, connectivity is such a big deal too.
It's a big deal.
I want to get off Metrolink, and I want a bus to be waiting there to get me to work.
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Well, we're in an on-demand society, right? You can buy things on demand. You can watch news on demand.
Yes.
People expect their transit on demand.
Yeah.
And so we have to modify our thinking to accommodate that.
Okay. So when Measure M was first, put together and predictions were made, or predictions probably isn't a good word, when we looked at how much it was going to bring, it's different. Forecast. That's a much better word. You forecasted it. It's changed obviously since then, because we hit the Great Recession, and it just everything just took a dive bomb. So how much now are we looking over the 30-year? What is the forecast for total dollars in on this?
In round numbers, it's about $15 billion over 30 years.
All right.
Yeah, the Great Recession clearly had an impact on that, but it also had an impact on project costs too. So it's leveled out a bit, but our current forecast. We're 5 years in now, but looking out 25 years, we believe that we're on track for about $15 billion.
Okay.
And we don't do that internally. We get help from professional entities like UCLA, Chapman, Cal State Fullerton, as well as Muni Services. So we're asking other people to help us forecast that.
Right, well, that's good. So accountability to the taxpayers then, I mean, $15 billion is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
So how is OCTA, how is your agency accountable to the taxpayers to make sure that it's being done as we've asked you to do when we cast our vote?
It's a great question. There's probably 3 or 4 major ways that we do that. First of all, we're required to do a Measure M quarterly and annual report. So that has transparent data about where we're spending the money. Obviously, everything that we spend money on, the board awards those contracts. The board makes decisions about the projects and programs. But very unique to Orange County in this self-help county world, we have a taxpayer oversight committee. And that is, it's a volunteer basis. It's screened by the Orange County grand jury. And then it's randomly selected by the OCTA board. So they don't get to pick who is overseeing them. And it's chaired by the county auditor controller.
Which is Eric Woolry right now.
So they meet on a regular basis, and once a year they're required to determine if we're in compliance with Measure M. Very pleased to say 25 straight years we're in compliance with Measure M. But they also have an audit subcommittee. So they select, with the help of our internal auditor, cities, recipients of our grant funds, Measure M funds, on an annual basis to audit. So we were talking earlier about cities becoming eligible for Measure M. They also have to go through an audit process. And if they're found to be out of compliance, there's repercussions for that.
All right. Is it hard to get volunteers to be on this, or?
You know, it's I don't know if it's hard necessarily, but it's hard to get people with the right skill set. I think a lot of people are interested, but we need people that can really understand numbers
Right.
and look at, you know, what the ballot language was and
Right.
understand what their role was.
Okay.
And it's sort of tedious work,
It
but it's an
is.
important part of what we do in Orange
Very
County.
much so, because I think the individual taxpayer, doesn't look at your agendas online,
Right.
even though your website is very transparent. You know, we've looked at it at OCTax. An individual taxpayer isn't going to be, looking at that and checking out. Have you, given that award to a company based on Measure M? So it's good that you have this as well too. So your board of directors, it's a large board of directors. It's made up of city council members and supervisors.
Right. So there's 17 voting members. There's an
Okay.
18th non-voting member, but the 17 you've got all 5 of the county supervisors, and here in Orange County we're in 5 districts.
Right.
So each of the other 10, there's 2 from each supervisorial district,
Okay.
and 1 is selected on what we call a one city, one vote.
Okay.
So a small city like Stanton would have the same vote as Anaheim.
Right.
And then the other representative is population
Okay.
weighted. So the bigger cities would have a little more weight than the smaller cities.
Okay.
And that really ensures a good balance, we believe, of representation.
Well, I really appreciate you being here with us today. OCTA does a lot of wonderful work for the county, and I do have to say, Orange County Taxpayers Association does spend a lot of time looking at your agendas and kind of keeping track of what you do. And I think as a government in Orange County, the transparency is really, I think you're without comparison to anything else. So we very much appreciate that on behalf of the taxpayers.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it. We take our job seriously,
Yeah.
and I know the board of directors is absolutely focused on making sure we keep that promise to Measure M. That's the bottom line. We
Yeah.
have to keep the promise to the voters.
Great. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If you want more information about the Orange County Taxpayers Association, members events, Proposition 13 information, you can go to our website at octax.org, or please go to our Facebook page, the Orange County Taxpayers Association. And with that, we'll see you the next time.